this month is Suicide Prevention Month, and I'm going to be talking about my experience with mental health, suicide, and kind of my journey through recovery, as well as my poetry book, The Wolf and Her Moon, just because I think it's a super relevant book right now. I wrote this book, I started to write this book while I was in the psychiatric hospital, and I was there because I wanted to kill myself. And so part of that experience, or part of this experience of writing the book, is starting there and starting in this place of hopelessness and being at loss. And I talk about, my recovery outside of that, in the way of skills and different things like that, and just kind of the emotional experiences I went through that. I talk about writing poetry, and different things like that. So I think there's a lot of stigma around mental health, and I work really hard on my Instagram account and now YouTube to end stigma, because I think that only makes it worse, and especially for people in the LGBT community who are at higher risk of suicide, 2 times higher risk than their heterosexual counterparts. And I think it's really important for suicide to be prevented, because it's an awful place to be in, and if there is anything that we can do to help get people into therapy, into programs to help them feel better, to help them find happiness, that's huge. And I want people to know that, people think my Instagram account's called Unique Radiance, right? And I am not always a beacon of hope in my everyday life. I think that you have to understand social media is a presentation people put on, but it's not, when I'm not posting as much, it's usually because I'm having a bad day. And my life is less interesting on those days because I'm depressed and miserable and sitting around doing nothing, because it's hard for me to do stuff on those days. So I'm just going to preface this with a trigger warning, because I preface my poetry book with a trigger warning. But one of the poems I wrote when I literally was going to the psychiatric hospital that day was, "When everything is too much and nothing is not enough." And so this is just talking about with PTSD, anybody who's had a traumatic experience can suffer from PTSD. And you have a numb flood cycle where you are numb and you feel nothing, and then you get flooded with emotions and you feel everything you didn't feel. When you don't feel emotions, they don't just go away. They're there, and they're gonna come out and bear their ugly head when you least expect it to. So a big part of my therapy was working on feeling my emotions consistently, and that was where poetry became a really big important part, because poetry is how I connect with my emotional mind, the emotional parts of myself, how I process it, how I take things that are ugly inside of me and turn them into something beautiful. Whether they're happy or sad or not doesn't matter, but the way that I string the words together, the way they're composed, the message they convey, the imagery they create, the emotional affect that they create, and reading them is so it's all a part of artwork, just a different type of artwork than drawing. So another thing I wrote, I'm trying to read these poems to help people who maybe don't read poetry and maybe don't want to read my book, or people who do want to read poetry and want to read my book because they relate to my poetry, but just to give people an idea of what it's like to be in this mindset, so that people can be more supportive of people. And I think whether you have depression or not, it's super important to read books like mine that talk about it, so you may relate to things even if you don't have depression, or anxiety or PTSD or any other mental health disorder. I think it's related by emotions, right? And everybody has emotions. And I think it can also give you a better understanding of people that you have in your life that do have, mental illness. My mind is a terrifying thing. Racing thoughts slowly eat away at all of me. Never knowing what horrors tomorrow will bring. I lay crippled by monsters that refuse to cease. I crave to be free. but I never find release. Relentlessly caged in circles of traps created by my own mental design. Darkness consuming my glimmer of hope as I resist, sealing my fate. On the dotted line, I bear down, scrambling to cope. I'm so fucked up in the head, tormented by demons until one of us is dead. And so a lot of that being stuck in that, which leads me to another poem, is refusing to accept things, refusing to accept reality, wanting things to be different, but then, we refuse to accept the reality that is, and refusing acceptance and not radically accepting your current situation, you can never move to the next step. You can never get out of being trapped, being stuck, and instead you just keep yourself spiraling down into hell and a psychological hell of like tormenting yourself. So along those lines, the wheels turn inside my head. They seem to understand all that's wrong inside of me, yet my heart, still frozen, refuses to accept. So this poem is about why I write poetry. And you don't have to write poetry, you can just write anything. Just write about the emotions you're feeling. Keep an activity log or a daily log of your emotions and what you're feeling. It helps to write, to release what's inside, putting ink to paper instead of blade to wrist. Violently they twist. I press down harder, emotions pour, releasing the flooded tide inside, my storming mind brimming with words redefined. Violently they twirl, as healing forces unfurls, and my hand dances to prose unread, the darkness born of beauty instead. The words may not turn scarlet red, but their onyx pitch against moonlight white reminds me to see, in the darkness there is always light. In the darkness of night, the wolf shall always find her fight. Speaking of wolves finding their fight, though, that is my dogs in the background wrestling on my bed. Can you guys shh? So I actually wrote that when I was in the psychiatric hospital. And it's hard being in a psych hospital, and you feel broken and hopeless, and it's scary and hard, and there's so many restrictions and things taken away for your safety, and it's not a fun experience, but it is a necessary experience in that sense. Part of the reason that got me into the psychiatric hospital was the fact that I was holding on to things, and I was refusing to let them go. I was refusing to accept reality. I had funneled myself, all of myself, into this super toxic relationship because I loved this person, and I thought that if I could heal them, that it would heal me, and I could fix everything just by forgetting about myself and focusing on them. But that doesn't work, and it only makes things worse, and it leaves you with nothing left of yourself. I broke myself into pieces, trying to patch the broken parts of you. I wasn't left with much when you left. In the darkness, I found self-love, gleaming like afternoon sun rays that creep through the cracked blinds. Yet in me, it poured from the gaping holes. Every day, the light reminds me to be kind and gentle with myself, that it's okay to put myself first, and that I am worthy of love from others, especially myself. I think that we spend a lot of time beating ourselves up in our own head with our inner critic, and we think that if we beat ourselves up that we're punishing ourselves, and somehow that'll make it better, that if we're blaming ourselves that we have some control over the situation. But we're only in control of ourselves. We're only in control of our actions. Emotions can come up and they're all valid, and we may not be in control of what emotions come up, but we are in control of the actions we have afterwards with them, and what we choose to do with those emotions that arise in us. Maybe we feel anger, Doesn't mean we need to break someone or lash out at someone we care about. There's healthier ways to channel that. And sometimes they can be a secondary emotion. Maybe you're feeling really sad or stressed out, and then anger is the emotion that comes out. Or, you're feeling really sad, so stress comes out instead. And it's the human mind is a complex thing. It's not an easy thing to understand, but you have to do your best on controlling what you can control. And you can't control other people. As much as you may think that you're doing something in their best interest, you cannot do that. You don't know what they're thinking. You're not a psychic. You'll never know what they're thinking unless you ask them what they're thinking. So never do something because you think that you're doing what's best for them, because you take their control away and their autonomy. And that's something that's super important. And it's like, oh, well, I'm like gonna isolate myself and, pull away from this relationship because I'm doing them a favor and saving them from myself. That's not your choice to make. They're a part of that relationship too, and that's their choice to make. And you can't make that choice for them. Even if you think it's for the better, that's not your choice to make. And so it's really about focusing on yourself, focusing on actions that you can control, and emotions you can control. Well, you can control your emotions, but how you deal with those emotions and how you deal with controlling your actions consequently after experiencing those emotions. Maybe I'm super sad and I want to cry, and maybe I will go lay on my bed and cry, but let myself cry for 10 minutes, and then you know what? I cried, it's over with. What am I going to do about it? All right, so this last poem I wrote when I was starting to get better, and obviously depression is not linear, so a better day versus a not good day. Depression is not I'm really sad and all of a sudden I'm gonna get up here and be great again. Depression is it's all over the place, and you can't expect it to be linear. So, and just because you're having a bad day doesn't mean you're gonna be in the psych hospital tomorrow. It could, but doesn't mean it has to be like that. It's all about how you deal with your sadness as an emotion. Instead of, perpetuating it, maybe, you practice opposite action, get up out of bed and, go for a walk or go to the park, watch the sunset, do something that you enjoy, read a poetry book, write something down in your journal, and, being purposeful with your actions to make you feel better, rather than being willing to that willfulness to sit in your misery and perpetuate that misery. So the poem is: depression is not mine. I do not want it. I do not claim it. But I do share depression with millions. There is no beauty in my sadness. Your kind words, brimming with good intent, add fuel to my internal wildfire. I want to feel what you say about me. But when I look inside, all I see is darkness. I want to love myself. In turn, I can allow others to love me, all of me. Not just the pieces I dress up pretty to make others feel comfortable. I want to believe in all the things that I know I am. I want to calm my raging storms. I want to soothe my beaten soul. I want to heal me. And I think this poem displays a point of willingness to get better. I want to love myself. Do I love myself in this moment? No. Do I love myself in any given moment? Who knows? There's moments where I'm like, yeah, you know what? I feel great. I feel confident because I'm doing acts of self-mastery, doing things I'm good at, things that make me feel good, and that I'm good at doing. And then there's times where I feel like crap and I'm not good at anything, and that the world is ending and shattering around me, and I am doomed to always be miserable and sad. And that's part of mental health and a part of depression. But the thing is, I write this poem about two wolves. One is the wolf of light and one is the wolf of darkness. And it's all about which wolf you feed. And I think that's a really important thing, because we often think oh, I'm sad and miserable, blah, 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 and maybe I'll just get better magically. But it doesn't work like that. You have to work. And oh, I'm practicing self-care because I got a manicure. If you sat there and got a manicure and all you did was think about how miserable you were and how stressed out you were, or like all these negative thoughts, you actually didn't enjoy that. And so that's another part of this, is like being mindful when you're doing these activities. Like when you're petting a dog, being really mindful of the moment, rather than being like, I wish I had a dog, or, you know, I wish I could do this all the time. Just being very mindful in the moment, thinking about the sensations that you're feeling, you know, the softness, the smell, how great and happy you are in this moment. Because happiness is not a destination. And I think that we like to think that it is, and if we just do something, magically we'll just be in this total blissful, happy state. It doesn't work like that, unless you like become a monk and you reach nirvana, but I don't think many of us are going to be doing that in our lifetime, especially if you're watching Instagram or YouTube. You're probably not in a monastery studying to be a monk and reach enlightenment. But I think that it's, rather than thinking of reaching happiness as a destination, you need to think of happiness as rare moments, and that's what makes them special, right? You're not constantly happy. They're fleeting moments that you can grasp onto. But you need to really enjoy those moments of happiness, because if you just think about being in a happy moment, but then that whole time in that great moment you were actually thinking about all the things that make you miserable, well then of course it's not going to have any positive effects, because you've literally kept yourself in this pit of misery the entire time you're trying to do something to take care of yourself. So that's a super important part. All right, so this poem is about the wolf, feeding the wolves, like I told you. For most of my life, I have been the witch of my own destruction, using words to hurt me, to beat me down. The pain was comforting, for it was a spell of my own doing. If I was already hurting, no one else could hurt me. That's wrong, by the way. But this is at least an illusion that I maintained. No one else could hurt me. I fed the wolf of darkness, far too much and far too often, barely leaving scraps for the wolf of light. I let the dark wolf consume me, feeling powerless to its gluttony. His hunger only seemed to grow the more I fed him, until one day I was brave and I asked for help. Now I've learned how to feed the wolf of light. The small white wolf inside me grows, as does my hope to live, rather than just survive. The dark wolf still begs to be fed, and often it's a reflex for me to do so. But each day the dark wolf gets smaller as my wolf of light grows stronger. It's my choice which wolf I feed, for I am the only one who can control me. So I really recommend reading my book if you're struggling with mental health and depression or anxiety or PTSD, as well as any other mental health disorder. I think it's really important, especially if you're having suicidal thoughts, and it's really important to get help. And not all, just because you get help doesn't mean it's going to be the right help. And finding a therapist that works with you, finding a type of therapy that works for you. CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, doesn't really work well for me because I'm very logical. So dialectical behavioral therapy I have found works a lot better for me because it focuses on emotions and feeling emotions and using, what emotions teach us. And so just because you found a therapist and then you see them and it wasn't helpful doesn't mean that it's not working. You just need to find the right therapist. And therapy is hard. It's not like I went to a therapist session and now I'm magically fixed. Again, you're not a car. You can't go into a shop and be fixed. That's not how mental health works. You're a lot more complicated than that. It's about you working on you, and therapy being a safe place to voice things that are going on and be able to work through those and different things like that. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you buy my book or enjoy poetry in general. I don't make a huge profit on my books. It's more about getting my book out there to people who need it, because I wrote this in a time of need, and the reason I wrote it was to help other people who were in the similar situation as me, because poetry saved me, helped me save myself actually, and I want other people to be able to help save themselves as well. All right, I'm Louv. My handle is @UniqueRadiance. You can follow me on Instagram and YouTube. And check out my website, uniqueradiance.online. If you want to buy any of my books, I have links to everywhere you can buy them. It's available worldwide. I hope you have a lovely day. and remember to be mindful in the moments of happiness.